Our program this evening is dedicated to the memory of life. One thing about life is that when life says it's over, it's over. Unless, of course, you want to go over it again. Being able to think is one thing. Being able to do so in a way that is personally profitable and satisfying is about 4,000 additional things. How life works, part 65. Men run track who couldn't make the football team, and men become economists who couldn't even run track. Those who will accept second-hand spirituality are the same ones holding up traffic up ahead as they sympathetically gawk at the wreck. An acid test of just how civilized you are is and just how serious you take sleeping with someone once. Do not, we repeat, do not try to apply this crucible to your own personal mental habits. Being hormonally upset can cause the sphincter at one end of the spine to pucker up, while neural disruptions can do so at the other. One man's personal motto was, no editorials, please. And when I say it was his personal motto, I mean he directed it to himself. History. It doesn't matter whether history is true or not. History is history, and that's that. After hearing the muffled snickers and catching the quick, sarcastic glances, one man told his dog, "Hey, don't put me on." A guy wondered, if all of man's human problems and interests are just distractions to keep him in line, then could not the mystical desire to transcend all of this itself be no more than just another example of it, even perhaps the supreme one? Neurons to the fire verification. Only a true yellow, red, blue mystic could bear to consider this seriously. BTC, brief temporary coma. You remember that. First guy, thinking is to the brain as bile production is to the liver. Second guy, so what's so great about that? First guy, nothing, I just thought I'd mention it. Anyone who lends you $1 would have lent you 10. The great thing about reminiscing, if you're ordinary, is that it gives sorrow and self-pity a kind of collective respectability. In the middle of the meal, from the kitchen appeared an apparition impossible to describe, who declared to the diners one and all, "We are serving red meat awareness and veggie time perceptions, alertness of the fasting and the thoughts of the overstuffed. No matter your taste or needs, to the right place you have come. Now eat, enjoy, for the check never arrives." Then, while everyone relaxed and settled in for a long, leisurely repast, several unusual people quite unexpectedly bolted for the door. Facts follow acts, as do fresh royal houses successful wars. Neurons hormones, color commentaries the games, and sanitation department reports the conclusion of all parades. Two kinds of people live to an extraordinary degree in their heads. Intellectuals, psychotics, and mystics. Yeah, I know that's 3, but you also know that mystics don't count. Ethics. The moral high ground as explained by the lions to the gazelles. The hill on which the lions wait for the gazelles. A discerning eye might also denote a similar basis in human affairs. And perhaps an interesting related item for those of you pursuing an interdiscipline curriculum is that the price of milk is determined by the farmers and not the cows. On this one world, to gain sympathy, some people will wear glasses who don't need them, and those who can't afford them will cut off a leg and pretend to be crippled. Race, religion, nationality, and culture. What empty people fill themselves up with. One man says, "For many years I believed that life did not look favorably on men making light of it. But then I came to the realization that due to its superior, all-encompassing position, not only is life more intelligent than all of mankind combined, but perforce dumber also, and thus my concern is moot." Okay, another way you can judge just how civilized you are is by how easily you are shocked by others, or by how badly you want to shock them. Upper class version of the above. You can either read graffiti on the bathroom walls or put it there yourself. The wonderful world of the mind. One man has come to a conclusion. The untold story regarding the inescapable connection between man's older, cruder hormonal nature and his newer, would-be nobler one. Ordinary guy says, "I could probably be a more spiritual kind of guy if God was a chick with a really great bod." Metaphysical moral. Many are called, but not that many. Note, a story with a moral is like two stories in one, and sometimes one story too many. Anyone who tries to help you is in part attempting to hurt you. Anyone who tries to say you anything is partially lying. Should I have included always? Onced. Long before most can remember, life said to everyone as it first fired up their mental engines, "You will now be able to think, and you will have some freedom as to what you can think. That is, just so long as it's either about this or that." You got that? Now, get out of here, you big lugs, you. And as everyone relaxed and began to amble on about their merry way, a few non-uniform people suddenly bolted from the main body and made a run for it. The explosive developments in neural math. 2 divided by 2 always results in 2. Stay tuned for at least 2 more versions of this. Laws don't hold civilization together. Fashion design does. No, of course it doesn't. Seriousness does. I just wanted to see how serious you'd take such foolishness. Anytime life gets tired of some carping spectator next to the main parade, it'll do one of 2 things. Have the parade make a quick little sidestep and run over him, or tell him to give some name and form to his criticism, and either way, he's no longer a problem. Definition. Verbal violence. Talk. Oh, yeah. Life has asked me to announce that for all of you who don't care for the word progress, you may use change instead. Some people who have no children are optimistic. To be alive is to be opinionated, and there is hippo opinionation, vulture opinionation, guppy opinionation, leopard opinionation, warthog opinionation, and human opinionation, which is about the same as the warthog variety. The danger in comparing man to other creatures is that if you're expecting a lot more, you can be surprised. One man's private credo: Life also gave everyone else the apparent ability to think, so as to distract me and keep me from trying to think for myself. Note, some people's personal views are harder to grasp than others. Okay, look, said a dad to the lad, while there may be nothing new under the sun, there always is under your sun. And sad should you forget it, since herein is the difference between an individual and a mere shadowy face in the crowd. Recent revelations in psychology. It turns out that there is a single common basis for man's belief in God, astrology, fate, conspiracies, and the subconscious. Indigestion. And the fear thereof. The substitute professor told the class, there is no philosophy of life. Philosophy is thinking about life. Intellectual fidelity and integrity, operationally defined. Never try to improve on something that's already impressed you. Extraterrestrial morality. A man who knows what he's doing doesn't have good intentions. He has no intentions. On a planet with atmospheric pressure, the trick to good thinking is never be too specific. One man came so close to having an original thought that the news director said he was in danger of losing his job. Important fact normally overlooked even by men with functioning brains. If life can keep you distracted long enough, you'll be dead before you ever know what's actually happened. The sciences, social and otherwise. History is the recorded remembering of what happened to ordinary men. The history of mystical men is not recorded because it is not remembered. A one-day tale. One day, the secret conspirators who secretly run the world all got together and decided, quote, what the hell's going on around here? Terminus exhaustius. And they wonder where the Latin scholars of the day are coming from. And I'm sure we join them in that. With one mythical band, when a knight received his shield, he had to then abandon all use of proper nouns. Update in neurology. Man's brain does not have two hemispheres. It has one and a mirror. A man who defends his mental position does two things. He defends his mental position and admits that it's indefensible. Physics, off the chart physics, that is. In a world of no opinion, anything's possible. Instead of going to the bother of having a mystical experience, one man just bought a turban. He said that a similar move had worked for his father when the old man got married, took out a mortgage, and became a priest. Academic roundup. Intellectuals are too smart to become mystics. Also too dumb. Some city distinctions re-examined. The difference between an immediate realist and a pessimist is in the spelling. Yeah. Remember, those using a script written by others will say anything. Those who don't realize that the mystical is just another form of entertainment don't even have a traffic cop's clue. Anyone who tries to tell you the truth is lying. As far as all the interesting possibilities of dividing man up into two besides the physical, electrochemical basis for that sort of bifurcation. Beyond all of that is still one that you can take and continue to pursue until such times as it becomes your own personal form of satisfying terminus exhaustius. That may seem simple when you first hear it, but I believe that if you pursued it, it becomes even more interesting. That is, we're talking about man, just an ordinary sane person to start with. The minimum basis for us to discuss man. So we're talking about a person who is verbally coherent, no great brain damage, just middle class, and living under some civilized conditions, that they are no longer a feral beast that just makes noises. After that, there are two forms of entertainment possible. Entertainment being anything that gets you through life, anything that gets you through the night, anything that just you find interesting. It's not open to anyone else from an objective view, if there were such. It's not open to anyone else's opinion or anyone else's criticism of what you find entertaining, but there are only two types of entertainment possible. And that is physical and mental. The physical part, there's not much to talk about. The physical entertainment is that which is necessary to stay alive, and it can be expanded a wee bit. Exercise, which actually you need some to stay alive, but just to take into account that it has become a form of entertainment now, that since people do not have to work, you have people who intellectually make a living, so they go and spend 8 hours at work, 2 or 3 hours there driving back, and then they have to go home, put on their little running shoes and their shorts, and go out and force themselves, make themselves get out and get exercise, which was not necessary at such times as we were having to toil each day just to feed our little stomachs. So beyond that, which is just to extend it enough to bring it up to date, physical entertainment is simply that which is bio-survival based, is eating, sleeping, etc., sex. And again, consider just down the middle of the road, middle class, ordinary sane people, there is no real great area of experimentation. That is, if you do, you end up anorexic, you end up obese, insofar as eating, or if it gets into sex, you can end up, make up your own thing. I always hate to get into perversions because I notice some people, if I just pull out an example, I always notice somebody somewhere always, winches and I don't want to think about it. So, yeah. But you understand, there's only so much tolerance for an ordinary person inside physical entertainment, that which gives you physical pleasure. That you overdo it and there's no longer pleasure. So that's about all you can say about that that's worthwhile. That's all that's of any great interest. That anyone who's sane understands that there are great pleasures. They're no less. I mean, what can be more fun? You've already heard several items about people saying that they may even become a mystic if they could have as much fun with their mind as they do sexually. So everyone knows, if you're sane, you know how much fun it can be to eat when you're hungry, to sleep when you're tired, screw when you're horny. I mean, the body is just singular in its enjoyment, in the way in which it can be entertained, but it is precise. It is just almost no room for tolerance or experimentation. In the mind, the other form of entertainment, it is a completely different story, as it must be, but let's see if we can't get into it, is a completely different story. But the first one that would throw most people, that's why I say it can be of more interest, is obvious as it may be for you listening to some of the things that we've been discussing. If you're going to buy that map, you might think by now it's obvious, but it's not. Once you see, and it is a decent form of a beginning diving board, this kind of dichotomy, because it is mutually exclusive in a sense, and it is exhaustive. It covers everything that a civilized man does, that he is either entertaining, if he's being entertained, unless you're sitting there in one of those little extended temporary brief comas, than if you're being entertained at all. If you're not suffering or running the risk of terminal ennui, you're trying to entertain yourself. But it is of interest to start, it can be of useful interest to realize that this is not an untoward distinction, that there are only two forms, two major forms. You're either going to entertain the body or entertain the mind. They are exhaustive, those two categories. But then ordinary people would find problem with that if they heard it as being a literal statement, especially those who tend toward the religious in the classical sense. Because they always want to split up into the spiritual or the metaphysical, or they want to come up with some other area. And all you've got to do is look operationally. All they would have to do, if it served any purpose, and they could do it, was if you're going to go listen to someone preach, if you're going to go hear a rabbi do a commentary on morality, if you're going to go do anything like that, ask yourself, does it entertain the body? No. People have to sit there and fidget around to stay awake. The body is getting no pleasure out of it. You can't say the body necessarily dislikes it if the room is of a decent temperature and you've had enough sleep. But that is not entertainment for the body. We can discount that. So there's only one thing left. Ordinary people can continue to call it spiritual. They can call it anything they want to. But it's here. It is here that the entertainment is being sought, and if there is any, this is where it is. Once you realize that those two categories are exhaustive, that everything fits, you can also, if you're doing it correctly, relieve yourself of some of the forms of questions, criticisms, entanglements about other people's forms of interest and their hobbies, about how can it be so strange. Because you can be, let us say, almost, to make it simple, you could be in a physical mode. Let's say you're out jogging. You're bopping down the street and you run up to an intersection and somebody's got their car stereo playing and they're playing music that you just can't understand why anybody would listen to that. Or you could be of such a nature that you could say, my God, how can people, that kind of noise, not even the particular music, just say, why do people listen to music? What a waste of time. Or you could be jogging past and there's some guy out there singing those beautiful paintings on black velvet of some of our favorite spiritual heroes, John Wayne and Elvis. And you could go, can you believe people spend money for art? Or you could be jogging along and look up and here come people out of a church. And you could think, geez, are people idiots? How can they put up with that? And conversely, somebody could be coming out of church and look at you and think, how could somebody, during a time that they could come in here and involve themselves in spiritual worship and get more in touch with the cosmos, how could they be out there running, wasting their time doing something like that? God doesn't care if you're fat and overweight and wheezing. God loves a wheezer. I don't know. If you see the reality of this, and it's not necessarily the last word, of course, anytime you're working with a dichotomous map, it's certainly not the last word, but once you see it from that basis, then also look what that does to all ideas of mystical experiences, extraordinary transcendental states. You're not going to be crude enough now to say, well, wait a minute, that is the third category. Nah. Now, on the basis that we're talking now, it either entertains the body or entertains the mind, or it doesn't entertain. You have no interest in it. And there is no middle ground. Not on that general basis. There's nowhere else to put it. And it's not just theory. It's just one of these things that's so obvious, again, that ordinary people have no business seeing it. If anything, it would be disruptive if they were forced to see it, because physically, there's enough now known about neurological disturbances. There's been enough accidents happen with neurosurgeons in the last 50 years suddenly sneezing, certain kinds of car wrecks, certain kind of children playing together and saying, here, let me put that screwdriver up your nose, Sally, or Fred, and hit it. There's been enough done, and other kinds of, when they were treating epilepsy for a while. But anyway, it's easy to find out. All you got to do is find somebody in a coma. I'm sure that some ordinary people would find this a very gross and oversimplified example, which is the proof of that itself, is find somebody in a coma. No matter what their background. Find somebody that's now in a coma, and you have a myriad of ordinary human activities of which they now display no interest whatsoever. Just some that come to mind: religion, art, music, literature, history, current affairs, clothing, fashion. That's it. And it does not even have to be a coma, some of you may know. There can be damage done to in such a way to the brain that you can actually get up and they can make you stand, your eyes are awake, and you can almost feed yourself, or you can swallow. They don't have to feed you intravenously. And you can, if you just walk by and looked at somebody, you might know that you were at a hospital and they were sick, but they can stand up, and you can kind of head them in the right direction, they can walk, and they still would experience a similar disinterest in those fields I just described with somebody in a coma. In other words, all you got to do is just affect the brain, just one little spot. And you're done for with all of the ordinary human interest, including religion, including metaphysics, including the mystical. But now I would hope that some of you do find that there's even more interest in the fact that it's not speculation or it's not theory, that's a known fact. I mean, you're not going to find a book on in psychology or neurology or anything that's going to point out what I just pointed out. They would give all the descriptions of people with certain kinds of neurological, certain kind of brain damage, certain kind of spine damage, but brain damage. And they will describe it, but no one ever goes so far as to say, well, it also struck us that when somebody has that kind of brain damage, they lose all interest. He could have been a priest, a rabbi before this, and now he's got no interest whatsoever. I mean, we show him pictures of the Pope. We tell him, this is Passover, this is Easter Sunday. And we say, they revive Picasso. Well, we just found out, Bach has a great grandson, and he's playing guitar. You can do it. And you find whatever the guy's background, they don't point out. Well, wait a minute. That is so obvious. The person, they'll say things like they're almost now less than human. I've seen that term, which is real neat. I mean, they'll go that far that they're not a complete human anymore. They're alive and their heart's beating, and they may live another 20 or 30 years if we kind of feed them and prop them up in the sun. But they are not actually, they're not completely human anymore. But if you tried to point out, well, all that is, then everything that makes a man human's here. Even the best of minds today, out in the middle class of the world, they would go, well, now wait a minute, that's a little hasty. We do not have enough statistical information to prove that. In fact, can you prove it? If they certainly not. No, you can't prove it to them. You're not supposed to. But you understand, they will not even consider it. It doesn't really cross anybody's mind. If the subject is brought up, it is always going to be from some faction. It's always going to be from some fringe. It will not be from the mainstream of, let's say, psychology or neurology. Nobody in the mainstream is going to say, you know what, after all these years of us seeing what brain damage has specific effects here and there, have you ever noticed, now I think about it, it just wipes out what everybody says are the human interest, all interest in culture, art, religion. It just wipes it out. And nobody's ever said that. And then other people around them, nurses, other neurosurgeons, just people walking up and down the whole hospital went, my God, do you realize what that explains? If somebody did say it, you know exactly what would happen. I just described it. If somebody said, do you realize that that's all that a human is? Oh, you got to make this kind of jump from more or less the real end, the bottom of the brain stem, where it really turns in the brain out of the spine. All you got to do is just get little pinpricks there. Just get hit the wrong way, and you've gone from being a good Catholic or a rabbi, not to being an atheist. You've gone from losing all interest. You have gone from being the world's greatest art collector. You've gone from being a writer working on the great American or Albanian novel now for 30 years, and now we show you, the New York Times list of the best books of the week, or we show you your typewriter, and you look at it like it's a piece of cold oatmeal. No one ever says, That explains so much. That is so wide. That encompasses almost half of the history of humanity. They would say, you're overdoing it, son. Who are you, by the way? What hospital, where do you work? And you go, oh, nowhere, by just pointing out, it's obvious. Oh, obvious, eh? Science does not work on somebody wandering in off the hall saying, well, that's obvious. Where's your statistics? Where's your research? And you think, what research? It's right there. There it is. Of course, if there's any actual operational validity to all this, if it was some sort of positive criticism, then you're left with even more obvious things long before that, is people decide to study psychology, study man. So what do? They got pad and pencil, a clipboard, and say, go get us some humans that we can study. And if some kid wondered in the hall here of this, the presidium of psychology, the mother lode, the origins of all psychology, and they decided that's what we'll do. We're going to study man. All right, nurse or assistant, go bring in some people that'll do, promise them something and get me some pencil and paper so we can start doing some tests. And somebody walks up and says, if you're going to study man, you don't have to go anywhere. You got you. Who's this kid? We're important Greek philosophers here. We don't have degrees yet, but as soon as we can afford the postage, we'll order some. We're the world's first psychologists. Who are you? And you think, well, I just thought I'd point out the obvious. If you're going to study man, you don't want to go somewhere. Or even worse, let's study man. All right, what do we do? All right, first off, we need to get a grant so we can buy about 2,000 white mice. And maybe a chimpanzee. And lots of paper, lots of graph paper. Somebody to do statistical work for us and keep records. And somebody, to feed the mice, to clean up the cages. And it's going to take a long time. And sure enough, they can kill 2,000 or 3,000 years. And you could say, well, if you're going to study man, I hate to point out the obvious. Maybe I'm missing something, says this kid. But if you're going to study man, do you realize you is one? Yeah. Why do you need mice? Why do you need a lab? Why do you need to go anywhere? You could stay there in your closet. You can stay in your room. Who is this guy? That's the way it goes. There is something beyond, if you're seeing something beyond you laughing at that, is considering that everything that you do on this planet, again, if you're just ordinary and fairly sane and healthy, everything you do is either entertainment for the body, and if it's not, it is entertainment for the mind. And it's that simple. Then consider some of this again. Ones I pulled out, we'll just read and see what happens. Was the worst one first. That is the best one. One man's private credo. If you remember, this is the one that follows up saying that some people's personal views are harder to grasp than others. That was done on the basis, see, I'll reverse it now for you. That's done on the basis that when you hear this, for even the second time, it's very likely, no offense to you, the listener, but it's very likely that you're going to go, huh? This is one guy's private credo. Quoting, life gave everyone else the apparent ability to think also, so as to distract me and keep me from trying to think for myself. Hint, the collective. We'll see if we can't get back. Who the hell pulled this one out? Some people who have no children are optimistic. File that back under hormones gone. One man's personal motto was, no editorials, please. And it was directed toward himself. Remember, those using a script written by others will say anything. Which could I refer you back to the hint about the collective, about a man who said that the reason that life made other people, or gave them the apparent ability to think. Since there is no beginning to end, I guess we'll just jump in the middle and try to pull them together. This guy's credo: life gave everyone else the apparent ability to think so as to distract me and keep me from trying to think for myself. If you're ordinary and sane, not insane, and sane. And sane. Didn't want there to be any mistake. Of course, justice prevails. If you thought I said insane, then justice did prevail. An ordinary person is absolutely tied. To be sane, you are tied to what is a collective reality. And for thousands of years, there have been philosophical games played by ordinary people, by people even with credentials as philosophers, which doesn't mean anything, but that's been a continuing game like, does that exist, or does that paper exist until somebody's mind, till your mind sees it, for instance. If I say, I've got a paper behind my back, you can go, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But does it actually exist until you perceive it in some way, until you either come up and see it, or maybe you put your hand around my back and you can feel it and go, all right. Or even, does it actually exist? If we leave it here and we all leave the room, does it any longer exist? If there's no human there to perceive this piece of paper, it's just been an old thing. It's just part of what keeps philosophers, assuming they still can make a living, making a living. At least, well, it keeps them entertained, which is more important than making a living. But now consider this a bit further, because it is not simply a faux pas. It is not a misdirection on, it's not an error on people's part to think that the collective is in some way overbearing. Now you can be, as pointed out in another item I didn't pull out, that if life has enough of some carping spectator beside the parade, which normally it doesn't even have to fool with them, but some critic, somebody really just bitching and sticking their tongue out and spitting at the parade, life doesn't have to put up with that. It's real simply just that fast. All it's got to do is make the parade just suddenly. They'll take a little sidestep and roll right over him. Or, the other one's a bit more metaphysical. The other one is that life sort of tells the guy, well, look, put a name on this running criticism you had. Put it in some kind of form, some kind of system. Put a name on it and, let me know. Either way, the man is no longer a problem. He's done for. That is not disconnected. That is not unrelated to this. The guy's credo. Life also gave everyone the apparent ability to think. The key is, to start with, he's saying everybody else has the apparent ability. And trust me, this credo is not sarcastic. I didn't read it sarcastically. He says everyone has the apparent ability. And they do. Every other sane, ordinary person. They display all that would meet the qualifications of a dictionary definition, of a psychological description of what is thinking. They speak, you can ask them a question, they apparently can reflect. They can even do this. Some of them, they stole it from me, but they can look thoughtful. All right, roll down. I never could figure, how could a monster ever sculpt those things though? I mean, with those big old... That's some trick. Life has given people the apparent ability, other people the apparent ability to think. So, to distract me and keep me from trying to think for myself. If you're ordinary and sane, which are synonymous because the ordinary judge each other to be sane. It's like, am I sane? Yes, you're sane. Well, you are too. Thank you. Well, you want it other ways? All cows moo. That's how they know they're sane. If in the middle of the herd suddenly you hear an arf arf, that would be in its own way like a carping spectator in a parade. You'll hear maybe arf arf once or twice. After that, not as soon as the cows hear it, as soon as the collective hears an extraneous sound, you will not hear it again. The collective reality, that is what people think, is a form of distraction, and it will keep a person. I know this is iffy terminology because it's not made to keep you from doing it, but the term is operable on the basis when you start realizing the kind of problems it just seems to be so sticky or so slippery, either way you look at it, of trying to get past this. Because what other people think is almost as though it is arranged. People do not analyze it. They don't look at it this way. But ordinary people, it's like if you're almost about to have an original thought, whatever that might be. Some thought not native to your bus station. Something going off on a track you don't normally do. We're not talking about insanity, but just something that is not native to the way in which you think. There is almost to people, without them analyzing, almost a kind of physical, inside the brain, a kind of physical self-protection that reacts and stops you from even going down that track. It stops you from pulling away from the bus station. That you almost, let's say it's something political, just to take an easy one. In some statement, you're watching television, listening to the news, and they make some statement like, well, the so-and-so party in France now said so-and-so, and you go, God, those, however group it is, and you start to do it, and something, I got to put words on it to describe it, but by now you should know you should be able to hear your own version. And you've been trying to do something extraordinary and understand that if anything extraordinary is to be had entertainment-wise, it's not with your body, it's up here. And so you suddenly catch yourself, no matter what the consequence, but you realize you always rail against hearing about left-wing political organizations in Europe. Because you got all kinds of reasons. They may coincide with whoever the leading liberal thinker in America is, or conservative, whatever I said. That may be right down the road, and you go, boy, because every time that those kind of left-wing parties get in there, they end up, and it gets this, the government gets unstable. We end up sending over money, it doesn't matter what, but you catch yourself doing it, and you try not to think it. It is physically difficult. Ordinary people, if they went this far, would follow that and go, well, all right, if we're playing speculative games, okay, but it's just psychological habit, or it's because of my background. I grew up. Wait till I tell you my background. Don't bother. No, let me tell you. Let me tell you about my father and my mother, the kind of political activists they were, or the kind of political ne'er-do-wells they were. Let me tell you the kind of economic situation in which I reached my formative years. Let me tell you the school I went to, the kind of professors I had. You understand? They would want to explain even, well, we all know how misled ordinary people are. They think mental problems are mental, so what do you expect from them? Well, mentally based. That was that apparition that came out in the middle of the meal from the kitchen that some of you didn't seem to get and announced what they were serving. There's all kinds of food available to support consciousness, to support mental entertainment, because it needs fuel the same way as the body does. But at any rate, you find yourself as you were sitting there trying to do something extraordinary, and you try and stop this normal flow of thought that you just automatically do for no reason. Never forget that. Well, let's see. That lost the rest of the audience. Is anybody else left? That always gets people. Well, it gets ordinary people. They realize, boy, am I ordinary and sane, and he's not. You find you try. All of you have got to have the experience already. You try and not think it. Not for any reason, not because, well, I shouldn't pick on the French. Oh, hell, everybody should pick on the French, but that's neither here nor there. A little humor. It's for no reason. It could be, it could be religious. It could be anything. You go, well, I shouldn't pick on other. That's got nothing to do with it. You're trying not to think in the way in which you normally do. And it is, I'll go ahead and speak for you, since I have your proxy vote anyway, it's not easy. But I submit to you, it can be operationally easier. You can find a way to go about it. Once you realize that it has nothing. Did you say nothing? Yes, I said nothing to do with, in fact, radically, on the basis of psychology, mental. It's not a mental problem. It's not mental resistance. It is physical resistance. And the reason that I was trying to get you to consider this item, that is extremely difficult to deal with individually to start with to think, well, my brain, are you saying my brain, has nothing to do with my psychology or nothing to do with my background, who I am, but you're saying that my brain itself, my individual brain, resists new thoughts. You know, it's hard to think about, and there's certainly no statistical, scientific evidence for that, so let's not even go into it. But you think about it and you think, you know, boy, is that iffy, boy, is that slippery. So, but if you consider what this guy's credo, he says, life gave everyone else the apparent ability to think, so as to distract me and keep me from trying to think for myself. Because I'm suggesting you might hear it easier to start with in an operational sense, that there is a physical resistance, but not just my brain, it is, but to give it an easier start, it is the combined, wherever you are, it doesn't matter, whatever your neighborhood would be, in the real sense, metaphorically / literally, your neighborhood, whatever your local reality is, whatever they think, if the local reality, and it's not just spatially, because it can go into gerrymandering to where it might just be you and your mother and then an uncle that you know that lives in Omaha, and then 4 people that you met who are now, they moved to Frankfurt, and that they claim that they knew somebody that lived in Auckland. And so it can be this kind of thing, you're just wandering around, but that would be your immediate environment. Follow this. It is though that there is a complete, other than that little gerrymandering, that would be your immediate environment. But other than that, with the rest of collective reality, you can perhaps easily feel a physical resistance. Or perhaps gives a better explanation than perhaps the way it's going, it doesn't. But you trying to think in such a way that you don't normally think, and there is absolute resistance. Ordinary people would call it force of psychological habit, or the continuing subconscious drives that they have picked up in their childhood politically, and it's none of that. That's an explanation. That is facts after the acts. And that's why they can't be backed up. That's why it can't be cured. That's why you can't cure somebody psychologically, because they're not sick. And that was not the basis of it. You can't even change people psychologically. Maybe this will make it a little, maybe it won't either. Who cares? Humanity knows that. Again, it's right in your face that you cannot change somebody psychologically. And if we had ordinary intelligent people here, surely somebody would say, well, that's not true. There's certain drugs that will. Aha. Now we're talking about prescription drugs. We're talking about scientific drugs. Not that funny stuff that you smoke and taking them behind somebody's. We're talking about prescription drugs from legitimate, trained scientists, doctors, psychiatrists that will change the psychology of a person. They would say that. Then we might have somebody around here. Now, how about my little fictitious kid would go, well, hey, now that you mentioned that, I've noticed, I've been reading you people's own literature, all of what you quote as being the clinical, neurotic, psychotic problems of people, all clinical mental problems would be, if not cured, no, cured would be the word, by drugs. Why don't you give everybody drugs and cure their mental problems? Son, wait a minute. Now the field of, what they call it, psychopharmaceutical treatments is expanding almost daily, but we do not, I repeat, son, we do not have near, I guess psychiatrists not say near, we don't have near enough statistical data, we do not have enough history on the long-term effects of these drugs to do it. The reason they're saying that is the drugs cure it. Of course, drugs would cure people from being religious. They'll cure people from being, well, that's not true. Mystics would be the ones in a couple of these that suddenly, unexpectedly bolted for the door. Once they realize, wait, they're about to cure me. Isn't that impossible to describe apparition that in the middle of a meal appeared from the kitchen and described everything was being served and said, go ahead and eat up and enjoy, because the check never arrives. Everybody else, relax and hunkered down for a long, lengthy repast, when suddenly several unusual people unexpectedly got up and bolted for the door. After realizing everything that they needed, everything, all the tastes they had were being served. And the check would never arrive. And everybody else left the belt and got ready to. I bet some of you suspect that may not have had that much to do with actual eating of food and etc. It could have been entertainment at the other end of the spine. There is a kind of comfort in the collective thinking of man. There is the reality, as they pose it, of it being sane, of it being reasonable. The fact that other people can apparently think, in a sense, the closer we get, the easier I can just condense it up and turn it into real strong extract of lemon instead of trying to add a little sugar and make it lemonade. Other people thinking, apparently, this guy says, is life's way of trying to distract him from trying to think for himself. But what's he really saying? If you could actually think for yourself, and it doesn't matter what, because we're dealing with the bifurcation of life, biologically, which includes what? That. The brain. As long as you're dealing with that, if a man tries to think of something that everybody else is not thinking of, it's not natural. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't mean that they're wrong and he's right, but it is not natural. If you try and think, and you can feel it. You've got to be able to feel it, or you're not even at the ordinary level. To just sit there in the privacy of your home and you realize what the community is thinking, whatever that means to you. Whatever the community, whatever the collective is that you consider your sane peers, whatever they're thinking, if you try to think otherwise, it does not seem right. It does not seem right to such a degree that you can't do it. Because if you do it, you'll no longer be normal. If you start off being normal, ordinary, you will soon be neurotic, if not psychotic, according to their definition. You'll regret it. You'll feel weird. You'll look weird. You'll act weird. Then you're no longer normal, and we'll quit talking about you. But this guy almost put his finger on it in a certain way. That he, of course you understand there's a bit of humor here. He's looking at it from the view that life, just to keep me personally, from trying to think for myself, what it's done is, it's like surrounded me with this whole bunch of people. Family, friends, strangers, but just all these other humans. And what it's done is made it appear that they think. And of course, he's saying like I do, because this guy, the hint being that he's a little out of the ordinary to start with. Not in a negative sense, but he is striving to do something independently, or he wouldn't even be noticing this. So he is saying, in a slightly humorous way, he's saying that he is convinced personally that life is just single, just to make sure, because life probably always been suspicious of him anyway. Yeah. That life has arranged it. It took everybody else around him, all around the planet, just everybody, and made it to where they appear to think like he does. Not think like he does, but have the ability to think is what he's inferring. He gave him that ability, so if he just glances around, like our proverbial philosopher carpenter on a horse flying by at 200 miles an hour, that if you just glance, everybody else, life's arranged it. You're here, and life knows that you may try to think for yourself. So to make it real easy, life just suddenly put another 6 billion people here minus one. Don't make me go through that 5 billion, etc. And it surrounded you by all these other people who apparently have a like ability to think. But the guy's not fooled. He says that now he sees. He couldn't see it immediately. He had to spend some time discussing, beginning to feel, checking out other people. But it'd take a little while, a week, a year, 2 years. But anyway, it wouldn't be immediate. But he now understands that life is very likely surrounded him, everybody else on this planet. He gave them now the ability apparently to think, but for one reason. To try and distract him like everybody else is saying, well, this is up and this is down. 6 billion people are saying that, but he's convinced, or he suspects, life has done that for one reason. to kind of distract him, because here everybody says, all right, this is so, and that's over here, and this is blue, and just to keep him from wandering off and thinking for himself. Because if you're surrounded by the people who apparently have the same ability, more or less, to think as you do, and everybody says, yes, well, the purpose of life is to help your fellow man. Your mother, your father, if they don't say it, if the statement's made and you look at your mother, your father, your best friend, your college professor, your priest, your rabbi, the president, the prime minister, and they say the purpose of life is to help one another. And everybody staying around you goes, it is extremely difficult. If you start off sane, which is the only thing, it is extremely difficult to think otherwise. And by now you people should hear, it doesn't mean that you say, well, no, it's not, it's to hurt other people. But to be able to think for yourself, you are so distracted and you don't analyze it. But what the man suspects, may I suggest, would work. Why are you using the future tense? Why are you using the speculative tense, like it would work? You still listening to carpenters? The carpenter joke's gone. We're not talking about woodworking. It's not woodwork. It do work. It is working, even as some of us are standing here. Remember, it's a shame we didn't get to these, but they're right then. Remember, those using a script written by others will say anything. That is also not disconnected to what we're talking about. Yeah. Because anyone who's using someone else's script is not thinking from themselves. It's impossible. And they will tell you anything. The inference being just that kind of colloquial term when somebody says, you can't listen to old Frank, he'll tell you anything. What they mean is, they're not saying anything specific. They're just saying, you can't listen to him. Because what he says is unreliable. He'll just say anything. That's everybody. That's not Frank. That's the Pope. That's our president. The quotes, well, let me quote from our founding fathers, right from our Constitution. A rabbi saying, let me quote now from the book of Moses or whatever. A Pope said, let me quote from the Bible. He's going to tell you anything. I don't mean that he has the power to do it, but he has no other choice. If somebody else is writing your script, which is the same thing as you are part of the collective mindset, that your thinking fits with everyone else's, then even what you think, your mind's going to tell you anything. And you can't look and say, wait a minute. Now, some of it's right and some of it's maybe a little, it'll tell you anything. And if you understand the colloquial part I meant about this crazy Frank or some old drunk, and somebody says, he'll tell you anything. Mm-hmm. If you understand that term, you realize, you couldn't even listen to him if it was raining.
No.
And you heard up on the roof of the bar and you turned to Frank and said, Frank, do you think it's raining? And he went, yeah. You'd have to doubt it.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Not selectively. You can't say, well, sometimes Frank's lucid and sometimes he's not. Mm-hmm. If you're using somebody else's script, anybody using somebody else's script, they'll tell you anything. Mm-hmm. They got no choice. It doesn't matter. Oh, it could be true, as they say out there in the street. It could be a fair representation of reality, but they'll tell you anything. And the part that was to counteract that and to straighten it out was, anyone who would tell you the truth, anyone who tries to tell you the truth is lying to you.